Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the fine art of holistic business development. Some of you might know me. My name is Georg Hobmeier. I'm not a developer. I'm not an artist. I'm actually a trained actor, which is not a really good background for game development. Or is it? We might find out soon. I'm speaking on behalf of Causa Creations today. We are a game development studio from Vienna. The company was founded in 2014 by me and a few other people. They all left for better shores, and after years of solitude in the desert, I was joined by numerous other colleagues such as Lisley, Ben, Chris, Brian, and Jombor and Sabi, our latest person to join the team. So this is the inner full-time circle of the company, and there's about the same amount of people operating with us on a freelance basis in various projects, sound design, additional code, designers, etc., etc. Now, Causa Creations has worked on a multitude of projects for PC, mobile devices, AR, VR, mostly games or so-called interactive experiences. Sometimes also in a more artistic context, but quite often and actually almost with so-called socio-political themes. Now, some of you might know Path Out. It won the Button Festival 2018, and I was highly discouraged wearing the medal for the talk. My colleague said, don't wear the medal for the talk. There's plenty of reasons not to wear them. But it's worth mentioning that now there's a classroom version that just came out last week, and it's now used in schools. We also work on VR stuff, as mentioned, currently on Holy Fire. That's a VR experience about nuclear energy and the desire connected to it. We just published an interactive comic for Android and iOS about the history of Vietnamese contract workers in the GDR. Sounds a bit dry and complicated. It's actually a quite sweet and personal story. It's called Glasfäden. And we still recover from Die andere Stadt, which was a monstrous location-based storytelling project we did in Vienna, and a big lesson on planning development time with external artists. Now, how does one go about developing such projects from a business side? Fasten your seatbelts as I walk you through an example. It's 2017, and imagine yourself walking into a theater, the Volkstheater Wien, for example, whose director has invited you to pitch something that could combine game and theater. You know, those theater people always interested in the digital. We need to bring the digital so the audience comes to us, you know, the young people who hate theater. The digital will change their mind. And you prepare something solid, you know, you collaborate with a group, like a known dance group. You bring it, and then they immediately show disinterest and go like, well, we already have a dance group, you know? We don't want your dance proposal. And then you change into a different mode. And here, the best strategy that I can recommend is just open your mouth and just say random things that come to your mind, you know? It's the holistic way. So AR is interesting, and it's 2017, so of course dystopian politics are great. Brexit, Austrian Brexit, Öxit, Viennese Brexit, Vixit, what a laugh, everyone loves a Vixit. So, and that's a hoot, so obviously they throw money at you. You pick a title, and then they take the title away from you, because the director still needs to exert their power over the title. So instead of your awesome title, Vienna Falling, a Falco reference, you settle with Vienna All Tomorrows, which is a reference to All Tomorrow's Parties. That's an old people reference. Any old people in the room knowing? Yes. Thank you, fellow old person. So that's settled. Austrian dystopian Brexit, AK Vixit, check. Some mechanics that even your mother would be able to understand, check. Some not totally stable yet cutting-edge AR solution, that's always nice. You know, let's add some more trouble on the development side. AR Core in 2017, perfect. And then you go like, I want to have a difficult time in the back end. I checked with my developer if he's emotionally ready for the joke. He is. Processing, lots of troubles with processing ahead. But hey, open source. Now, I mean, the project is basically finished by then. You just grab a few pieces of paper, you write down choice-based events, 300 of them should do. Then you grab a few actors. It's a theater, so you'll find actors. You go to the canteen, you drag them to a recording studio. You go before lunch because afterwards they are drunk. That's only partially a lie. That's actually true. They do drink a lot and they start at lunch. The older ones especially. And then you invite people for testing. That's the fun part. Testing, testing, testing. Lots of testing. There's never enough testing. Everyone complains, not enough testing. Let's test weekly. Let's test daily. Twice a day would be good. Oh no, we test too much. There's not enough time for development. So that's the horror. And then the real horror starts, because at one point, you suddenly run out of time. You go like, oh, great. Oh no, my God, 5 days. And then nothing will work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 game-breaking bugs. And we call this the Verdun phase. But to not despair, it is in the nature of the universe that all game-breaking bugs will fix themselves exactly 20 minutes before the thing goes live. It just happens. Trust in it. Just code, 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 code. And at one point, it will go away. Et voila. Stage set, costumes distributed, players engaged, Vienna All Tomorrows unleashed. A multiplayer game about Vienna's dystopian future, where players decide upon the future of the city while reaching for power as part of 3 factions. And here's a little video so you see what this actually is all about.
Sie, meine Damen und Herren, wurden unter 2 Millionen Wienerinnen und Wiener auserwählt, um uns in eine strahlende Zukunft zu führen. Und wir werden nimmer sein.
All hail to Cyberheupel. You can actually build Cyberheupel. There's like a chain of events. You first need like a cybernetics company instead of people in Simmering. And then at one point you can revive the corpse of Michael Heupel and he'll rule supreme. Man bringe den Spritzwein. So at this point, some of you might have realized that this is not really about business development. What is he talking about? I've been lying to you. This is not really about the fine art of holistic business development. Instead, this is actually about the fine art of holistic game design via interdisciplinary artistic research and an experiment on the so-called unreliable narrator. Excuse me, I'm a narrative designer. I do these kind of things. So let us look now at a few of the takeaways from this kind of very particular setup. Because this strange connection, a theater that is not really known for a lot of technological experiments working with a game development company, that can bring positive and negative things for both sides. And here's a few takeaways. I call it the good and the ugly bad. So the individual gameplay elements were fairly simple. I mean, it was really, do you want to build a wall around the 6th district, yes or no? I mean, a little bit more elegant in the phrasing. But the combination of this kind of a relatable humor, people wearing costumes, everyone could understand, you know, do I take this decision or that decision? That formed something that was actually more complex and more enticing and entertainment than we originally thought. We actually thought, oh, this is going to be a bit boring, you know, like this and that. But then people running around and the embodiment of them in the field and in exchange with each other was quite nice. And then people essentially just took these names we gave to him. You are the authoritarian leader, which means you get this weird red and white coat and a steel helmet. And people took it and ran with it, you know. This is my role. I'm the leader. Do everything I say. And that created also quite curious behavior. Not everyone. Some people just stood there in their costumes, but other got quite, I don't know how to put it, extroverted with it. And this was another point. There was a replayability factor that we had no idea what happened. People came back from the tests. People came to numerous shows. They wanted to play the other factions. They had figured out there were some exploits. There was a group of techno-utopians who came back, and we had to actually go back into the game and fix things so they would not break it and win the whole time. So that was quite interesting. And the sober actors were really great to work with. We didn't work with the old drunk ones. They do exist. So Austria has amazing actors, and this theater in particular had amazing actors to work with. I mean, and having worked with voice talent in games, like a very, very high level. So if these people would have like appropriate agents, you know, they could work like on the highest level of voice talent in the German-speaking region. But they don't care, you know, because they can play theater and this is more entertaining to them. So, the ugly bad. Theaters in game development. There's someone laughing. She's from the performing arts. She suffers as well. It's the worst workflow combination ever, you know, because theater people want to change everything, you know, the whole time. And then they think that 10 weeks is the longest possible time someone could eventually work on a piece of art or anything, you know, and you go like, well, this takes me 1 year. 1 year? In 1 year, I give you Wagner, the entire Ring, you know? This is how I work. You should work like this as well. Very little understanding on how the modern world works, you know. Not even talking about the use of communication, email, text messages. And sorry, I have to get something off my chest. Why on earth are actors always leaving voice messages on WhatsApp? That's the only way how they can communicate with the outside world. No other way. That's not the problematic part, but it's a little bit annoying sometimes. Theaters can give you incredible bureaucratic grief. It's a bit of a combination as well. It's kind of the Viennese love of bureaucracy together with like a 19th century institution that refuses to change. That's really brutal. You give them a carpet and they say this carpet could go up in flames. Well, here's the certificate. What? But this certificate, it doesn't have an official stamp. Yeah, it's a PDF. It needs a stamp. Stuff like that. The whole time, every day, all day long. And there's some really weird workplace beef that you don't understand. But people are so full of drama there, it's amazing. The technicians hate the audio guys, the video hates everyone, no one likes the guys in who's hated by everyone. Everyone hates the director, that's the funniest part. The director hates the guy who's in charge of the accounts, and they all bitch to you about each other. That costs you about 30% of productivity. Highly entertaining though. So, and then there is a sudden death mechanic that we've only found out in the middle of things. That means if the director thinks that they would want to use the room where you're doing your, I mean, I don't want to brag, but it was really successful. People loved it. But the director has other plans for it, you know. They want to do another thing that they like better. So then it's gone. It just disappears. All the money, all the set, everything done, invested, just disappears because the director has other plans. And then another director comes, and then it becomes unthinkable that this thing will ever come back to the light of the stage. So here we were, it was 2018, our thing has disappeared into the void, but we had this mechanics and this trashy code. Obviously we had to rewrite the back end, and wanted to do something with it. So our first step was, let's try to move into more commercial fields. Immersive theater is a big thing in Great Britain and in some parts of the US, so we partnered up with some people there. Didn't go that well. I think it was at the end a fight. Is this a game or is it a theater piece? And our British partners refused to kind of let go of control. They wanted to direct the thing. And we were like, no, please, go away, this is not working out. The next attempt was to use the concept and create a framework for X or multiplayer projects in emerging cultural and educational market, providing services to... And every time I tried to explain it to someone, they were like, this is too complicated. How you want to sell something where it takes you like 4 minutes to say things and I don't understand anything? We got a little bit of funding for the technical foundation, but as a business model, it was just too complex, and we got a little bit frustrated at that point. So we started selling tarot cards as kind of a relief. Some of you might have seen that project. It was very profitable, and maybe even holistic from a business perspective. Sephiroth, you can get it on sephiroth.games. Like and subscribe. But we really wanted this to happen. We thought this is a fun concept. We want this to happen. We have all this work invested, and we want this to translate into something, you know. And because we're a company, some sort of business case would be ideal. And because we're a company that, you know, really cares about causes, political causes, we thought, well, let's look at, you know, an electrifying cause, an actual use case, not an abstract framework. And what could that possibly be? And here we have this statement, it's now or never, from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in April 2022. Here's a very pressing issue, climate change, you know, it's very important. And here's another very pressing issue. Kids complain that schools have no idea how to talk about climate change. Not as a global issue, you know, some systems are doing better than others, but overall, and this is part of our research that we did, you know, it's a huge problem. This is an actual quote from someone next to me on a bus in Vienna. Obviously, a bit of a more Viennese lament. So if climate change is the topic of the century, then we must actually finally start making this topic the central issue in schools and teach people accordingly, you know, with like the best means possible. And we actually thought that the best means possible would be an engaging multiplayer game that features cutting edge technology, you know, that's always fun, brings new things to the table, entices people. And eventually, you know, this could translate our artistic research accumulated in Vienna All Tomorrows into an interesting business case that would fit our particular profile. And this is what we ended up with. Now, this is no done affair, so to say. This is actually currently moving from prototyping into a pilot phase. It's a mixed reality game. And it's obviously a little bit different because we cannot move an entire hall of costumes and props into schools. So everything it actually needs is just 3 tablets, potentially a laptop. That's not really decided yet. Students are pushing together tables, groups of 3, taking a tablet in their hands, and they engage with each other over a climate change simulation. Yes, dear informatics students, a simulation with big air quotes. You know, like don't get hung up on the simulation part. It's a casual simulation, but apparently that's a terrible thing to say, casual simulation. They make decisions, good or bad ones, and in this role of decision makers, they learn how they can affect the climate, but also affect public moods, society, and certain population groups. Now, the decision-taking thing we clearly took from Vienna All Tomorrows, and even in the early tests, that worked quite well. Obviously, we are really throwing out the cynicism here, because Vienna All Tomorrows is really cynical. You could manage the city, it didn't matter whatsoever for the power of your... The only thing that really mattered for the game is the power of your faction, you know? You crank out policies so that your faction becomes more powerful. Maybe stuff happens to the city, who cares? Let's crank up those votes. And this is something we got really rid of. This is not something to be cynical about. Maybe we do a PC version with extra cynical power struggles. The role-playing is also something we took, so playing characters based on prompts, and then you cooperate and communicate with each other, minus the costumes, obviously. And since we're now slowly going into the educational field, we're working with experts, and they keep on telling us role-playing is very important and is one of the most efficient learning methods nowadays known. Again, you see there's 3 factions. We tried 5, 7, 2, 3 is a good number for that. And at the end of the day, you have to cooperate to solve those big problems. We kept on using this AR functionality. In this case, the planet becomes a sort of a user interface. You point an AR-capable device, preferably a tablet, at a central surface, preferably a table, and then you navigate the globe. Takeaway, and that's quite interesting, from Vienna Tomorrow's iPads are still the best thing to use. We tried all the other things, iPads, still great. So, and I'm already running a little bit over time, so that's the project in a nutshell. We're working on it thanks to Vienna's Wirtschaftsagentur Wien. They also gave me money. And here's a short video with some impressions from the current state. This is very early prototype, so things look quite messy, but it gives you a general idea.
Rising Tide is a mixed reality experience designed for educational environments. The players become active participants in the struggle against global climate change. The game aims to make systemic effects and long-term development visible, while keeping the multiplayer interactions fun and accessible. Using cutting-edge technology, it's a new and unique solution to understand our biggest ongoing challenge for the next decades. Understanding climate change with Rising Tide.
One day... Oh. Yes, in the next phase we will actually hire an actual human to make the voiceover. Thank you, Alexa. So, a few takeaways from this artistic research to commercial game dev, educational game dev process. Artistic research gives you an amazing freedom, except for the title, obviously, but people usually don't interfere with the actual process. And you can put to a certain degree, good kind of weight on the process itself, not so much of the product. Obviously, if you want to work with a theater, they want to have something that is like presentable, runs, etc., etc. But it still gives you a lot of space to operate in. For us, it was also a bit bridging the gap. I've been living in the UK for a while, and there is a much more intertwined, interdisciplinary work that is half commercial, half artistic, particularly in immersive theater, but also in games. And in Central Europe, we have this awkward divide: art good, technology bad, technology awesome, art ridiculous. And yeah, I think it's really like a different mindset than the Anglo-American region, or also like the Scandinavians and the Benelux countries have in that regard. So for us, this was actually quite interesting to bring this together. And obviously, this is amazing to test out stuff. There's also like space for failure that you might not have in other opportunities. And you can approach things from fresh angles, naturally, in such environments. Then there is the disaster for artistic institutions. I said it before, but I have to repeat it. It's a complete drag to work with some of them. I worked with theaters, museums, smaller artistic collaborations, etc. Museums are actually fine, because there is anyway, it's more of a commercial work, didactic work, etc. But yeah, with theaters it can become quite nightmarish because of their old-fashioned ways to operate. Grants themselves can also be quite tricky, so grants can have strong limitations. In particular in Germany, they always want you to publish the code open source, which is very nonsensical if you work with Unity. Yes, I'm going to put my builds up. Yeah, of course, open source. Thank you. And then it's the code that you're going to make in these kind of settings is quite often trash because it's prototyping, and very, very rarely you have the opportunity to, to like put up a proper architecture that can be used afterwards. Yeah, and of course it might not always be usable for biz, whatever you're doing there, but I can still highly recommend it to sometimes leave those business tracks and venture out in the artistic fields. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Georg. This was really, really inspiring.